Welcome everyone to the first DataBeers Brussels.
Yay!
Okay, welcome everybody to our 18th edition of DataBeers. I'm going to just share here. Okay, so I think you're seeing my presentation. Welcome everybody to DataBeers 18. We are very happy to have you here. Okay, is this going? Yes. Okay, so we are DataBeers Brussels. We're part of a network of DataBeers, and we have been going for over 4 years, giving short talks about data and just enjoying beers with people. We are just based on, first we have beers together. Yeah, we just have beers together, and then we share some data stories, followed by some questions, like very straightforward, 7 minutes short. And afterward, we just stay and chat and have some more talks, some more beers. Sorry. How do we do this now that we are away from home, doing it in a webinar? We have a question and answer section, as well as a chat that you can use. If you have questions for the speakers, put them in the question and answer so they can be upvoted, and then we will ask them for you, or allow you to speak directly with the speaker. On the meantime, you can join us on GatherTown. I think Charlotte has sent a link, but we will share it very soon also here with the password so you can access. And here you can just meet everybody you would usually meet for this talk and have a conversation while or after each of the speakers present. This is who we are, and we want to know who you are and what you do. So we're putting a poll right now. Please answer it. Oops, wrong one here. Yes. On the meantime, here's also the speakers that we're gonna have tonight, and I think it's also going to be very interesting. And as it is tradition for us, we're going to start with a very short data story. In this case, it's the story I'm very interested in, because I watched this documentary on Netflix by Sir David Attenborough called A Life in Our Planet, in which he talked about issues, especially about loss of biodiversity. And then this started reminding me about what my father or my grandfather was saying about this field used to have fireflies, and also about things that I experienced myself being a kid and seeing the swallows making nests in my balcony, and that doesn't happen anymore. And one of the topics he talked about was about overfishing, about how we were losing the biodiversity in our oceans. And there was a story that he shared about a small Pacific island nation called Palau, sorry. And they saw that their catches were going down, so they decided to restrict fishing in some areas, with the logic that if they let life just sprout in those areas, the fish would get out of them, and you could be able to fish them in areas where it's allowed to fish. So I found an article, a very recent article, in which they put in numbers how much we actually would need to we protect these areas in order to be able to have big benefits. And right now we only have 2.4% of the oceans that are protected. And these people say that by increasing it to 7.4, we could increase the catch by 20% in the future, because the fish just spills over the areas where they can be fished. And looking at their mathematical model, they saw that only by putting at 7.4, in the worst case scenario, they will go at 20% higher catch. And also they gave an idea on which area should be protected. And the greener it is, it means that the easiest that it will be to increase the catch simply by protecting that area. And with this data story, I would also like to ask you, if you ever have one that you think it's data worth telling, just contact us, maybe for you to give a talk, maybe to share one of these mini stories that we can share. Also, there is a survey that we would like you to fill after the yes, well, this will come later, after the talk is done, after the event, just to know how we have done, how we can improve. Yeah, thank you for listening. We're going to start soon. And on the meantime, the question was, what's your background? I see that there's 41% that work in data in industry, 45% work with data in academia, and then 5% in academia without data, and 9% in industry but without data. And with that, I would like to stop sharing. And I think Johan is talking now.
Actually, it's me. But before I start, could you just tell our attendees about GatherTown?
Of course. Yes. So about GatherTown, maybe it's easier. GatherTown is basically as if it was a video game. You can go in there and meet your meet everybody that is in there. So you can talk maybe while the speaker is talking without him or her listening to you, or just be there to share a beer with your friends that also join GatherTown, join us here.
Okay. Thank you, Jose. So so in the chat, you see the link for the GatherTown and the beers, so you can join us there during, and hopefully after the event, we can also hang out a little bit and chat. And on your screen, you should be seeing our first poll. These are questions asked by our first speaker, Anxo Sanchez. So it's my pleasure to have Anxo here. Anxo was one of my two supervisors. The other one you already met. Those of you who come regularly, the other one is Jose, who spoke a couple events ago. So who is Anxo? Like first time I met Anxo, I don't know if Anxo, you remember this, but the first thing you told me in person is, do you want to have a beer? So it's since then we had some beers, we had some papers, and Anxo really built his career in complex networks and game theory. To kind of, I can tell you, like his H index is 44 and growing. But you can also check, there was recently a paper about network of scientists doing iterated prisoner dilemma. And you can see him there as one of the hubs of this whole network of scientists. Apart from being an awesome scientist and doing really interesting stuff, from a lot of experiments with humans and very nice model to explain it, Anxo is also very active in data promotion. So if you speak Spanish, I really recommend to go on his website and find the link to his blog and read his blogs, because they're very, very interesting. So Anxo today will tell us about social network in high schools. So go ahead, Anxo.
I'm going to share my screen. What is this thing here? Okay, here it is. So, oh no, not this one, sorry. Wrong window. It's this one here. So you can see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, there it goes. So thank you for having me. Thank you for your introduction, Yelena. If you've seen this series on TV, you're way too old to be here, so go home and stop drinking beers. And these are the friends that helped me doing this work. This is Jose, the other co-supervisor of Yelena. Diego, his PhD student. Victoria is my postdoc. And Francis is the guy that does the tough work being a professor at high school. So this is Dunbar. It's not Scottish whiskey, although he likes Scotch very much. He's from Scotland. And what he did was that he figured out that most primates have typical group sizes, and he plotted this funny regression as a function of the neocortex ratio. And with that, he concluded that we typically have or should have groups of 150 people, which became known as the Dunbar's number. That's not all. He also did something else with these other people here. He figured out that we typically have our friendships arranged in circles. So you have 5 very good friends, another 10 making a total of 15 in the circle of good friends, perhaps another 35 or so friends, and then acquaintances, and they are all inclusive circles. So the ones in the first circle are in the other circle. Okay, so you can see it in this picture, but you can also see it this way, as I'm showing here. So this would be your best friends, your less best friends, acquaintances, and whatever. Okay, with these guys I'm mentioning here, including Robin and Jose, we came up with a theory. If you know that there is a maximum number of friendships and that friendships are different, you put this into the machinery of maximum entropy principle, which you don't need to know what that is, but then you can predict this circle structure, and you can also predict that everybody has a characteristic parameter. I hope this mu doesn't count as a formula. It's the only thing I'm writing in the presentation with that. And this parameter can have positive values. If it's 1, then you have your circles in this 3-to-1 ratio I was discussing earlier. So 3 or 4 best friends, 12, 15, etc., etc. However, there we found out that there is another regime in which mu is negative, and then most of your friends are very good friends. And that was very strange, but we were able to show that it happens in communities of immigrants that are very close and that have many people to make friends with. So this was the first time I saw a prediction of a theory in social sciences verified. So this was your other mountain, and this is what people with negative mu see. All they are good friends. For people in series, this is for younger people, not so young, but that's lost, and that's where you would expect to see mu negative. Now, in our first studies with the kids, we went to a school and we polled all levels asking about their friendships, and we saw evidence for these circles. These are the results on the first circle, the circle of very best friends, and these are the results on circle 2. We also saw that cliques, namely networks in which everybody is connected with everybody, typically have sizes 5, which was something also Robin has proposed. And that was all very well and fine. But then we wanted to do more. So we wanted to see how this changes dynamically in time. And we went to a high school in Madrid, where Jose's children and my children go. And we convinced them to allow us to use the kids for our experiments. So I'm going to tell you for the rest of the talk just a few things about what happens in high schools. So one thing that happens is that friendships are not reciprocal. So here's Ernie, who is a friend of Bert, and Bert is just a roommate of Ernie. So mostly only 60% of relationships are reciprocal. That is a number that appears very often, although it's larger than what you can find by chance. These are rewirings of the network, and this is what you observe, is never 1. So first thing, you may say somebody is your friend, and this somebody is not your friend. That happens. Then about the circles, this is the circle 1 of very best friends. This is circle 2 of just friends. We did 2 polls in December and in May, and the numbers are much higher than what I would expect from Dunbar circles. So it's like in the first circle, it's around 15 or so, and the second one, it's around 20 or so. We don't know what is going on here yet. If you restrict yourself to friendships within the same class, then they are closer to Dunbar circles. They are not exactly the values you expect for Dunbar circles, but they are closer. So one thing that may be happening is that they still relate to their guys that came from the same primary school as they were. So what we observed also is, in most cases, the parameter mu for every person increased in most groups, but also in a couple groups decreased. That meant that in most groups, people went from having just a few very good friends to having a more normal structure with friends and good friends. But in others, it went backwards. So it went to just having a few good friends. And this is the same representation. So for instance, something that happened here on group B is that most people got their mu reduced. And in group B, what happened is that there were only this many very good relationships, circle 1, and in the next wave, there were many more very good relationships. So it seemed that the groups got stronger together in that class. That's something that's different from the other classes. As I said, this is a plot of a very recent wave. It's not the same wave, it's not the same kids, but just to show you that these are the first year and they still may be connected to the schools they were coming from. So that may be making them confused a little bit about who are the friends they're changing already. Now, more things you can do with this is we want to use it to study bullying or detect guys with problems or kids with problems. So here we plot how many people rejected a person and how many people liked a person. So you can see that, for instance, there are a couple of persons here that are in real trouble. Also, there are people like here that are hardly noticed, not liked, not disliked. So this is, thank you, Yelena. So we also can detect the result of interventions, like when Francis started allowing in his class people girls to get together in the seats, they got more friends with each other. So that's also a thing we see. We also see that half of the classes that are English speaking are separated from the half of the classes that are only Spanish speaking, and that's bad. And it happens all along the year. So this is 3 years already, 12, 13, and 14, and the high school is really segregated in that respect, even if they are in the same building and they're the same type of kids. Okay, and finally, we also see that classes in which there are many people of the same gender, they may be in trouble because they tend to get together. Funny enough, in order to see that they actually form a cluster, you have to take into account the enemities. If you don't see 2 clusters here, as I just showed you. Okay, so enemities are also important. So that's almost about it. This is what we'd like to go to the data-driven school, in which people really, the teachers can help themselves with the data to detect things they don't realize, and I hope we can help them in that way. And we wanted to continue this study for 6 years, but as you can guess, this is not going to be possible, at least the historical series is killed, and so that's about it. So I'm sorry I can't be in Brussels and enjoy this nice beer, so I will keep crying and drink my Carabanchel beer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anshul. Okay, so one thing I think Jose forgot to mention is that we give beers to the people who ask the best questions. We are a bit geographically constrained where we can send beers, but Belgium and the neighboring countries are in. So if you are here, and please also ask questions, even if you can't receive beer, because there is always a beer waiting for you when you come to Brussels. So please, do we have some questions? Yes, Yerali. Charlotte, can you let Yerali speak?
Yes, can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. We could hear you.
There is a problem here in my computer. Okay, so is there any relationship, or do you know if there is any relationship between negative mu and the Asperger syndrome?
Oh, that's too much of a question. I don't know. Simply,
because I think it could be a relationship.
There could be, but it's a good suggestion. I should look into the literature about that. But this negative mu regime was not known until we found it out theoretically 2 years ago. So there's not that much known about it.
But maybe there could be studies or literature about how people with this syndrome can see their friendship.
Okay, Yeah.
Okay.
I'll look into that, but I can't answer your question.
Could you please explain what syndrome is about for us with the cheaper tickets?
Asperger.
Asperger syndrome. Okay. Any more questions from the audience? A panelist can also ask questions. Achim? Achim, you're muted.
Mute is off. Did you also do a test on the gender stuff also if, concerning gay people, if they were tending to go more to the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever?
No, these are mostly 12-year-old kids, and we didn't want to go into that. That would have put us in a lot of trouble with the ethics committee.
Yeah, probably.
So it's just, if you want, biological sex admitted by them.
Okay.
So Eleni had a question or comment. I can think that mu falls in uni years.
Well, you know, we tried to do that in my university, and we tried to do that through an app instead of through surveys. And guess what? The students didn't want to download the app. They can run around with their phones with 50 pirate applications still in their data, but they won't use my app.
Yeah, what can we do? So can I ask also something? So you said that COVID kind of stopped, but when we talked, you told me that you are that you will collect data kind of a couple of weeks ago. So do you have already some hint how the network changed with COVID?
Well, the thing is that the classes of 12 and 13 years old have been reduced. So they go every day, but the groups are smaller. And then being reduced, their lives are easier. It's like 19, 18 people, and that's easy to accommodate like in 2 groups, and they don't have many conflicts. And then the groups in 14 years old, they're still 30, but they go every second day. So they only go in groups of 15, and that's very confusing because they end up, well, they are in the same group, but they are in 2 groups, so it's complicated. We're looking at the data. Actually, Jose went today to the high school to discuss with them, but we don't have a clear idea yet of what's going on. We want to do another wave before the end of the academic year and see what we can learn from there. But for now, it's very confusing.
And you said about when you were saying how they split by genders, that enmities are like who is enemy with whom? So you ask them also who you don't like?
Yeah, we asked them something like, well, first, in the first study we did, we asked them very complicated questions to like hide this. But now we ask them directly, whom you don't like to be with, and among those, who are the ones you dislike most. And they don't give a lot of names. Typically, there's a few that name a lot of people. But this is a very important information. In fact, I didn't show this slide, but you can also predict friendships with the enmities and vice versa to a large accuracy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Eleni says maybe you can have an Amazon voucher to convince them.
I thought of that. It didn't work.
maybe you should offer beers.
Yeah, that could. Yeah, but that could be difficult to justify to the grant funders.
Yeah, I can bet. So Jose and Ramji have a question.
If I can go ahead. Well, I'm just curious for the research that has been done so far, if there are any simple changes that can have a huge impact on the experience of all of the students, like something like a nudge factor. Have you been able to identify any of those things?
I'm not sure I got your question. Could you please repeat?
I'm just curious if, with the research done so far, if you have, if you have any recommendations or any actions that can be done, small actions that have huge impact just like a nudge factor?
Yeah, one thing we have already told the high school is we have an algorithm in which they can optimize the social well-being of their groups. So when they move students from one year to the next, we give them advice on how to redo the groups. In any case, we already told them they cannot have groups with 20 people of one gender and 10 of the other. That's already problems. So they should know that.
Awesome.
Jose?
Yeah, so I was thinking about there was one graph that you show depending on the language that they spoke. I was just thinking about which kind of high school is this? Like, is it like international high school, or is it like? Okay.
In the Madrid region, there are high schools in which you have the possibility to study practically all subjects except math and Spanish in English.
Okay.
But the high school has the two routes. One is mostly in English and one is mostly in Spanish. And for joining the one in English, you must come from a primary school in English. So that's one of these programs which are completely stupid of the Madrid region. That in the end, it's just economic segregation.
Okay.
Because the people that don't have enough money, they cannot go to the primary schools, even if they are public, but their parents won't take them because they don't know English. They can help them. So but it's the same high school and the same subjects, only mostly English, mostly in Spanish.
Okay, and between classes that speak, so different classes that don't have connection but have a shared language, I'm just surprised that there is a stronger connection of students than between them, because I was thinking,
you give them a label and they identify themselves. The English speaking are called section, the other ones are called program, and I'm from section and I'm from program and you are the others.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting.
So Anton, the last question from Anton. Do you want to ask it yourself or I read it? I'm going to read it. So to save time, can someone predict or stop bullying using your data? And if not, what is the main purpose of this data collected?
Well, aside from understanding how friendships are formed and how they evolve along our lifetimes, which is our main scientific question, we do hope to identify bullying by when we have enough data to start connecting patterns in the data with reports of bullying. We need more data to do that, but our hope is to be able to do that, yes.
Okay, thank you, Ancho. I think I have to stop questions now. And we go for our next speaker. Well, bravo, Ancho.
Thank you.
So Charlotte, you can start the next poll. So our next speaker, Achje Wees. So I practiced pronouncing the name. I hope I got it. So Achje, so now something totally different. Achje has very typical background for data scientists, if there is actually such a typical background for data scientists. So she started studying history at VUB and also development cooperation at UGent. And then after that, she started working as a data scientist in Corriut, so that's supermarkets for those who are not from Belgium. And this is when she started kind of liking data visualization. And this is when she started on the ground, picking up tricks for what makes data visualization work for clients and what does not work. At the moment, she works as a Micropole Insights, as a database consultant and business intelligence. And she pitched us this talk with saying, I'm going to tell you why your baby is ugly. As a new mother, I really appreciated that pitch. So Anke, please go.
So good evening. So data vis, I'm not going to say data visualization because it's unpronounceable like my name in English. Let me start sharing my screen. There we go. So yeah, they didn't like my title, Why Your Baby is Ugly. So they changed my title, How to Get Your Audience to Love Your Data Viz. So how make people like your ugly baby. I don't have babies myself, so it's easier for me to talk about it. So who am I? So Jelena already told that I started working in Colruyt with data, and there I also got a lot of frustration. I created data viz and reports and whatever, and they were not always accepted by the user. That was the best part, when they said, I don't like your report, but also they didn't use it. You put all the work into it, you have this little nice baby you worked out for them, and they don't use it. So I got some frustrations, and during the years I started, and then lately also with the co-workers from Micropole Insight, we started working on some kind of theory on how to get your audience love your data viz. So let me start with Lady with an Ermine from Da Vinci. This is the end result of the painting, and before it was like this. So we lost the ermine, and well, the hand is up, and her gown is also a bit different. Then, well, I can't believe it's Da Vinci who drew an ermine like that, but apparently he did. And we ended with this lovely animal who is fierce, has got claws, looks a bit like a lion. And why am I showing this painting? Because apparently the big master Da Vinci was also able to do some rework, like people who are doing data viz, but also people in data science who have to create a model also have to do some rework. And why am I showing this is Da Vinci also had to do rework. And why didn't he put the damn white ermine, which with its muscles from the beginning in there? Probably because he didn't ask the question to Sforza, who wanted to have this painting of his mistress, because this is his mistress and not his wife. He didn't ask Sforza, why do you want to have this painting? What are you going to do with it? Why did Sforza want to have this painting? He was going to get married. Of course, not with his mistress. At that time, you didn't marry your mistress. You kept her aside for the weekend, I would say. But if he would have asked those questions, maybe he shouldn't have done that rework. And that's also the theory that we have been working on with Micropole Insight on, and that's the theory of user-centric designing. This theory is already used when people design chairs or cars or whatever. But if you use this theory in data visualization or data science projects or whatever, it could help you. And it's 4 little steps, circle-wise, because you have to check with your user, that could, well, make sure that you have to do less rework than needed. But in this theory, there is always one thing that people forget, and that's the user. Always put your user in the middle of your work. You're not making this for yourself, but you're making it for somebody. And if we go quickly through the steps, because I've got Jelena showing me that I only have 7 minutes and I have to be fast. So if we go through these 4 steps quickly, and you keep those steps in the back of your head, I promise you, you will do less rework. So first, the context. Start with the profiling of your users and your environment. You don't need to know what their favorite beer is. It could help, but you need to know why they want you to make something, and you need to know where they are going to use it. In the next step, you need to know the business questions and the business processes and the data flow, and what are they expected to see with the data, and which actions are they going to need. And something that could help you is not to buy 5 Toyotas, but is to use the 5 why questions of Toyota. Be that nagging little child that is keeping you asking you questions. Why are bananas yellow? Why are bananas this? Why are bananas that? If you are that annoying little child, again, rework will be much less. And then you're in the design phase. Show what you think they need. So you make some sketches, or you quickly draw some data viz together in an Excel or whatever, and then show them what you think they need, and also explain them why you put a bar chart in there, or a pie chart, or why you're not using a pie chart. If why you're using certain colors, it's also important. And then the last step is check your work. One way to check it is the junk charts trifecta checkup. And that's just that you say, what was the question he asked me? What is the data telling me? And what is the visual telling me? When I studied history, my promoter always told me, if you're writing a paper, ask your grandmother to read it. She doesn't know anything about what you're writing about. And then she will tell you if she is getting the message that you want to bring. In fact, you can do the same thing with your database. Bring it to your grandmother or your partner if he or she doesn't know what you want to do with it, and tell them, what are you saying? And then we worked on this theory, and then we said at Micropole Insight, we said, okay, let's test this theory. So I had a colleague and she said, I want to see the clicks and click-through rate of my LinkedIn page. And I said, okay, here you go. These are the clicks. Are you now satisfied? Can you do whatever you want with this thing? And she said, no, I don't understand what you're showing me. I don't see what you want me to show. You're not giving me what I want to do with it. And I said, okay, then we did the 4 steps and we came to this little thing. And in fact, she wanted to see which articles are more important and are getting more clicks. So now she can click on data, for example, and then she will see on a bar chart what is speaking and what isn't. And then also based on the hashtags, which hashtags are making people click through on an article. I gave her this, the above first, and then later on with a little bit of rework, I gave her this. And then just in a nutshell, know your audience, know what your audience wants, know what your audience needs, and check regularly if you're still on track with them. And at the finish line, check if you're answering the audience's questions. If you do all of these things, you will listen to what they want and give them what they need. And at that moment in time, your ugly child will be a child that they love and use. That's it.
Thank you, Achir. Yeah, okay. It's interesting. I have to say, I give a talk about how to give talks, and I say a lot of the same things about the talks as you just said about the database. So it's interesting. Do we have some questions? Don't forget, you might get a beer if you get to ask good questions. Panelists can ask questions.
I have one question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, is it frequent that clients do not know what they actually want, and so they change their mind during the process? How frequent this happens, for example, in real life?
Every time it happens, because in fact, they start with the question, I want to have a beer, and then you give them a beer, but you don't answer, you didn't ask them, do you want a brown one? Do you want a blonde one? Do you want alcohol in it? Didn't you want alcohol in it? And then when you start discussing with them, they start thinking about it. But I don't like brown beer. Why would I drink brown beer? And that's, it's always like that. I've had lots of clients, well, lots. All of the clients which I first interact with, they say, I want to see this or that.
Okay, thank you.
Anke, can you stop sharing your screen so we can see you?
Can I ask a question, Jelena?
Yes, go ahead, Anshu.
What would be your advice to make visualizations of the data I showed in my talk about the high schools? I mean, we're combining those with also data about their individual performance and such, and it could be a lot, but then, so would you just show a subset? What would you do?
Well, the good news is I started as a freelancer from the beginning of this week, so you can hire me then. That's already one thing. No, more seriously, it depends for what you want to use it for. For example, the box whisker plot. To be honest,
No,
I
what
hate
I
it.
have in mind is for the teachers, so they could like click on a student, because we don't have their names, but they do. So they click on the students and they can see things about their network, things about their performance, even their marks.
Well, the scatter plot that you used, I found very good, that you can see immediately the groups and things like that. So I would work with those things, and also maybe distance between one person and other things, and use some coloring for, this is a group of people with not a lot of friends, and this is a group of people with lots of friends. I would make it more in that way. But you can always hire me. Yeah? I know I cannot make any commercial things.
I think about it.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat from Eleni. So she says, I think the whole field of HCI is based on the end user, has a different opinion than designer. Human-computer interaction. Thank you, Eleni.
Thank you. Well, I think that I like the way of Ancho, who said when you first met, let's have a beer. Have a beer first, and then the opinions they can be different, but they will come together.
So we have one question from YouTube. For Ant, are you a fan of just giving your clients the tools so they can build their own visualization? For example, Power BI, Tableau.
Yes and no. Yes, I want to give them the tools, but no, they cannot have it just like that. They have to work for it. And why do they have to work for it? They need to know what the data is all about. At Colruyt, we gave them the tool after a training of 4 hours, and then we had people who were wanted to have all the tickets of all the shops, of all the history of Colruyt in their report, and you had to explain them. Colruyt is a big shop, sells a lot of things, and is already existing for a long time. You will never get that in your report. So yes, self-service is a good thing, but they need to know about the data and they need to know what they do. So I think after some course and make them a bit data literate, that it could work.
Thank you. So Casimir, you had a question, and then after that we have Bart, and then I think we have finished for now.
Yes, indeed. So I guess the conclusion is you really need to understand what your client actually wants, not what they're saying up front. And so what you said about the banana is really true. You feel annoying when you're doing that. You feel like you're asking what is already known. That's something I have to do a lot myself. And I'm curious, do you have a technique to be less annoying or feel less stupid when you're doing these things to get to the issues quicker?
Sometimes I start with a sentence. I know I'm going to be annoying, and I know I'm going to give you the feeling that I'm stupid, but just I want to know everything so that I'm not going to bother you in 6 months again to create because I'm still busy on this same data visualization for you. And if you give that context, they understand that you're going to be that annoying little child. Because on the other hand, if you don't ask those annoying little questions and you're not that annoying little child, you'll have to pick up your phone or open a Teams meeting or whatever to keep on asking those questions. So it's better to do it from the beginning.
Yeah. Okay,
but
so
don't feel bad. Don't feel, well, just be the annoying little child, but inform them that you're going to be the annoying little child. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I understand. Alert them of the risk of not being complete upfront. Makes sense. Yep. Thanks.
So the last question is apparently more or less answered. So very quick answer. How do you feel about self-service BI?
Give them the tools, make them data literate, and then it's okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans. Okay, so now we're going to have a 5 minutes break. So grab your new beer and we see you at 8:50 exactly.
Don't forget that if you're interested, there is Gather Town also to check out.
Okay, hello everyone. Let's start again for the second part, the 18th DataBeers. So let me introduce Casimir. He's a business engineer from University of Ghent. We have a common acquaintance, let's say, Thomas, who builds microgrid hydropower plants in Kenya and wants to use data science to detect problems and to do predictive maintenance. And so,
Johan, excuse me,
yes.
but it's first normally Debbie.
Okay. Then forget what I've said. Apologies.
Okay.
I thought it was Casimir. Okay. Just a pause to build up suspense. Okay, so our next speaker is Deborati. She's a professor at the Université Catholique de Louvain. She got her bachelor from Calcutta and her master in epidemiology and biostatistics from Johns Hopkins University, and is currently the second director after the founder left of the Center for Research on Epidemiology of Disasters, since 1992. Voilà. I'll leave the floor to you, Debbie, if you can share.
Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out.
Okay.
Now I have to make sure that I can share my screen. Oh, well, it's interesting, the poll results. Sorry, I'm being distracted. Share screen. Make sure I'm sharing the right one. Yeah. There you go, to me.
Great.
Okay. So I was just looking at the. So the MDAT database is a database on all natural disasters in the world. So for 184 countries who are members of the United Nations, and for all natural disasters. So the database would not cover civil conflicts or other humanitarian emergencies such as wars and stuff, but it does cover earthquakes and storms and cyclones and so on and so forth. And it covers all natural disasters. It covers all the countries in the world. And it covers natural disasters from 1900. So it's about 120-year long database. So it has a systematic way of collecting the data. So it was started by epidemiologists. So it was very important that the definitions, the exclusion criteria, etc., were exactly correct, so that there is comparability between the different records. Let me just put it on a, yeah, much better. Somebody should have just told me that. Okay, so it was created in 1988. It was funded by the US Agency for International Development. It's still funded by them, by the USA, the government of America. So it covers disaster occurrence and impact data. So in other words, it's a database which does not, like many other databases on disasters, it does not focus on the physical characteristics of the event. So you can have very large observatories or very large databases, which are meteorological databases or climatological databases or seismic observatory, which collect very specialized data on the event itself. So just on the hazard, on the event itself, we are specialized in collecting information on the impact it has had on the human populations. So if there is a disaster in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, this is not an event that interests us if it has no human impact. So a disaster will interest us only if it has a human impact. Actually, this is outdated. 22,000. It's a different number now. And the numbers are, the disasters are collected at a country level, and this has implications because many disasters sometimes go across countries. So a storm will go across 5 countries, will crash right through Myanmar, Indonesia, Philippines, go up and end up in Philippines. So it will crash through many different countries. What are the sources of the database? This is a unique database in the world. So the IPCC, the World Bank, the UNDP, all of them use this data for policy, for global policy, and also for national policy. So what are our sources? The sources are mostly governmental sources, United Nations, other government specialized agency like the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency, the US Geological Surveys, the IFRC and NGOs, the Red Cross, they report data from the field. We also get a lot of data from the reinsurance companies, insurance companies and reinsurance companies. They report data to us and we also share our data with them, research centers, and of course the press. The use of this data is very, very wide. It's downloaded many times a day. I mean, hundreds, maybe thousands of times a day. Very often it's multilateral banks. So the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, private banks will download the data. UN agencies use it a lot, UNICEF, UNDP, and so on and so forth, WHO, national governments, to make their policy on disasters, on natural disasters, especially since now climate disasters are becoming much more common. It has become part of the whole climate portfolio. Academics and research institutions, there are a lot of research going on using our data from economics, from meteorological departments, and so on and so forth. And a large portion of the people who use our data are private firms, consultancy companies, insurance companies, and funnily enough, the military is a very big user of this data. I'll just show you 2 very quick, easy slides that show you a little bit how the natural disasters are distributed around across the world. So the largest share of all disasters in the world is in fact floods. So they account for nearly 43% of all the disasters in the world. The next group are cyclones, storms, typhoons. They're called different names, but it's exactly the same phenomena. The names change, hurricanes. The names change because it's based on the origin of the phenomena. So if it's originating in Pacific Islands or in the South China Seas and so on and so forth, the name is different, but it's exactly the same phenomena. And then comes all the other smaller groups of disasters, the earthquakes, extreme temperatures, heat waves and cold waves, volcanic eruptions, droughts, wildfires and bushfires. That's volcanic eruption. I don't know what this one is. I can't remember. Anyway, you can find, if you're interested in natural disasters over the world, you can find it in the Human Cost of Natural Disasters, which we come out with the United Nations report. Very briefly, changes across decades. If you look at how numbers of natural disasters in the world, the disaster impacts have changed. So you have over here, the reported disasters have increased from about 4,000 to about 7,000 in the last 2 decades compared to the 2 decades before it. And economic losses have moved from 1.6 trillion to about 3 trillion. So it has almost doubled. The economic losses has been huge, partly because a lot of the disasters actually occurred in wealthy countries. So as soon as there is a disaster, say in Japan or in the United States or in Western Europe, in Spain and France are countries which very frequently have natural disasters, the economic loss figure is inflated. Why? Because some of you might be economists here. Why? Because the asset values are higher. And as soon as the asset values are higher, the value of the economic loss is higher. So bushfires in California is going to be a lot higher than bushfires in Vietnam. Yeah. What are the current challenges we face? We have a small team. We've been doing this for like 25 years now. We're sitting in a very, it's a monopoly business, this data set. And so we have been, the data set is organized in 4 big sections. One is the physical characteristics of the event. So the epicenter, the Mercalli scale readings of an earthquake, or the Beaufort measures for a storm. So the physical characteristics of the phenomena. Then the human characteristics, how many people died, how many people were injured, how many people were displaced, how many people were homeless, so on and so forth. Economic losses by sector, so the agricultural sector, the infrastructure, public infrastructure, insured losses, non-insured losses. And for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been actually georeferencing the footprint of the disaster. So in fact, we have a spatial footprint of exactly where the disaster occurred. And that is a huge adds a very, very, very high level of richness to the data, because you can actually use satellite data to look at the population who's living in that particular footprint. We have what they call geoshapes of the impact. And you can layer these impacts to see whether these shapes are occurring in the same place all the time, or is it moving around, and countries can make plans. The most of the data is reported by non-governmental organizations, insurance companies, governments, and there are variations. They contradict each other. Sometimes one group says, 5,600 people have died, and somebody else says 53 people have died. And so that creates some challenges. And lastly, the global collection of data has, for us, we have to think of moving into more automatic data mining algorithms, because right now we have a rather a labor-intensive process, and that has to move into the 21st century. We also have to do a lot more with using satellite data to gather the impact area and so on and so forth. So those are essentially the challenges we are facing now for the next 5 years to change the data set. You can, in fact, I don't know whether I've got any slide here. You can, in fact, go into our database. The address is here. It's free, it's downloadable. You can go and get whatever data you want from there, and all our publications. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Are there questions from the audience? Or...
Can I make one?
Yes, of course.
I have a question about the way to estimate economic impact, because I'm really worried about those figures. Recently in Madrid, we have a snowstorm that got the town collapsed for 10 days. And then the mayor asked the central government for 1,300 million euros in a very strange calculation, which included paddle reservations not used, money he didn't got from the parking payments. So the government told him to go away, and he sent another one for only 200 million. So which is which, and which number would you put there?
Sorry, could you, the first part of your, who was, it got cut.
Yeah.
Who exactly is making these estimations?
The Madrid town hall.
Yeah.
And first it was 1,300 million, and when the government laughed at them, they said, well, it's 200.
Well, yes, it's usually what we do is we get our data for countries like Spain, for instance, European countries. We would get our economic loss data from insurance companies, because almost everything in countries like Spain is actually insured in some form or the other, either public insurance or private insurance. And so at the end of the day, we close our dossier 3 months after the occurrence. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, we will get Munich Reinsurance or Swiss Reinsurance, with whom we work. They will give us the number that they have covered for Madrid. So that's...
Yeah, but that seemed good to me in the beginning. But then, for instance, Madrid has experienced a tragedy in terms of hundreds of thousands of trees lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not insured. I mean, they're in the public parks. So
yeah, well, the public, it may be in the public parks, but they may still claim insurance. The public sector may still claim insurance. It can be, yes. Usually what we have is we have the insured losses, and then the government also issues the non-insured losses. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Okay.
Usually the government does, they will make an assessment of the losses because it's in their interest to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Gianmarco. I will allow you to talk.
Thank you. So it's quite similar to this last question. How do you handle when there are conflict between different sources of data? And is there a more reliable source? And can you can classify sources for reliability, or do you average them? Is there a rule?
Yeah, so we don't average, no, we don't average, because we get into trouble. From the governments, we've got into trouble with North Korea, we've got into trouble with the Hong Kong government. So we get into trouble. So we don't average, because that's a very risky thing, because then you get, all the different sources that are mixed up. So we have an internal protocol of reliability. Now you can question that protocol, but that's the only way we can work. So what we have is, we have a set of our standard data suppliers. So which could be, as I said, the UN agency in the country. It could be a very big non-governmental agency, civil society agency like the Red Cross. It could be an insurance company. So we have different sources. And we have a protocol that says that if we have a value that comes from a UN agency, that has the highest value. So these are agencies that don't have a stake. So the UN agencies, the UNDP office in the country provides us with that has the higher value. If we don't have UNDP, then there are two other sources who are triangulated to have this about the same value. So we will take that. So we have a kind of a hierarchical protocol by which we decide which value we will put for public use. And then we have in our database all the alternate values that come from different sources. So we can see, in fact, it's quite interesting, we can see, in fact, which source, whether insurance companies, one insurance company, say Swiss Reinsurance, systematically provides very low values, or whether, and Munich Reinsurance systematically provides very high values. So you can do that. But it is an issue, yes, absolutely. It's a choice.
Oh, thank you. It was a very clear answer.
Okay, then we have Luna asking whether citizen science is the future of disaster data collection. So what's your opinion?
Yes, it's important. This is an important question, because we have to move with the times, and things are changing very fast. And the citizen science thing, I can't get my head around it, because I come from a classical epidemiology background, and I have very, very strict rules by which I use data. I mean, definitions have to be, correct throughout. And especially I come from, using patients, so, everything has. So I can't get my head around it, but that doesn't mean it's not good. That doesn't mean, it just means that I'm not capable of it. Now, citizen science, it was quite interesting. I was in Haiti, after the earthquake. I don't know whether some of you remember, there was this huge earthquake in Haiti. 250,000 people died within 2 hours. 250,000 people died within 2 hours, which is the population of Liège. Now, I was there maybe 6 weeks afterwards, and they had this crew from MIT who were there, young guys with a lot of energy and, moved around a lot with walkie-talkies and things. And they had this citizen science thing going on. I didn't have the time to go into it. And they had people who were sending them, I don't know who asked the question. I think that's what it is. People send photographs and things. My house has been, has been broken. 3 windows have been crushed. My roof has fallen, and so on and so forth. What I never understood, actually, and I didn't stay long enough, what I never understood is how do they work out circulatory information. So, circularity. So, you have 3 people sending you photographs, or 13 people sending you photographs of 2 houses that have been crushed in the earthquake, but the same 2 houses. The same 2 houses. So you can have a mass of information which is in fact completely circular. How do you deal with that kind of thing? How do you deal also with subjectiveness? I think, 2 windows that are broken in my house is catastrophic. It is not catastrophic compared to what, other people. So I don't understand this citizen science thing. And I don't know how people, how do you untangle what is circular, that is repetitive, or is giving the same information, or what is not? But some of you might know better than that.
Thank you. Then we have a question from Yerali. I'll let you ask yourself.
Okay. So is there any data related to human reactions to disasters by countries, for example?
By what? What was your last word?
Human reaction to disasters. Is there any data related to that to understand how humans react to disasters?
Yeah, there's a lot of work actually done on mental health.
I want to say randomly or not randomly, I don't know.
Well, first of all, it is clear that if you ask any expert who has actually been in a disaster site, there is very little looting and violence and any of these things that you think is happening, or the media projects that the people running around, breaking into things and doing, doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. It simply doesn't happen. People in general, I'm not saying that it's always true, but in general, and I've been doing this work for like 25 years, in general, people are extremely solidaire. Okay. It's amazing how solidaire people are. Solidarity. There's an incredible amount of solidarity. There's very little really antisocial behavior, very, very little. There is, of course, but very little. And there is a lot of work, to answer your question, there's a lot of work done on mental health, people's mental psychological response to an acute event in their lives. There's a lot of work on that, yes.
Can we find some of these results in your webpage?
We do, yes. We've done work in Cambodia, quite a lot of work in Cambodia on mental. But if you just Google natural disasters, mental health, psychosocial, do Google these terms, and you will get some very interesting work done on psychosocial reactions to the tsunami, for example. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, nice, very interesting.
Thank you. We'll have to stop here too, so we also have a chance to let Casimir tell his story. Everybody knows now who he is from my partial introduction. What I forgot to tell was that he is a strong believer of using data science as a force of good. And so in this context, he founded actually, or co-founded 2 companies. One is Toka, which is part of the IMEC iStart accelerator program. And there he tries to reduce emissions in shipping industry. But today he will talk about Everest Analytics, a non-profit. But I'll leave the floor to you, Casimir, to explain what it is.
Yes, perfect. Thanks a lot, Johan, for the introduction, the 2 introductions actually. Appreciate it. And then this should start working, hopefully. But it is not.
So maybe in the meantime, you can tell us.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just go without slides. That's possible. As Johan said,
so maybe take a look at the poll, and if people are getting close or not to the right answer.
Yeah, I closed the poll by mistake because I was trying to fix my screen. My bad. Okay. It sounded cool. That's definitely a part of the answer. It's actually the middle name of Geoffrey Hinton, a famous researcher on AI, and his middle name is Everest, and it also sounded cool. So definitely both the right answers. And yeah, communication with clients is the big issue, and I'll get to that if my slides want to cooperate. Okay, so as Johan said, I graduated last year as a business engineer. I also started my own startup on machine learning to reduce fuel consumption in the shipping industry. And I'm here to talk about the non-profit Everest Analytics. Let's go back 1 year in time. So after I was about to graduate, my plan was to do several data science internships at African startups or companies. And to travel a bit in between. Sounds very fun until COVID happens, of course, and everything turns out impossible. One of those companies was Hydrobox, and that's where I met Johan, or through which I met Johan. It's a company that makes micro hydro dams that fit into standardized containers, so they can place these in small rivers in very remote villages, so they can give electricity to villages who would otherwise not have any. Very noble cause. And they wanted to use data science for power prediction, so the needs of the village, to predict that, to do predictive maintenance, and to optimize the settings of those machines. And it was that kind of projects that interested me. But then, of course, COVID happened, and this wasn't possible. But those startups told me you could still do these projects from home, of course. But at the same time, I was starting to focus more and more on my startup, which was becoming a full-time thing. So I didn't really have the time to put into these projects. But at the same time, I don't like saying no, definitely not to projects that are so cool like these ones. And I heard from a lot of my co-students and friends that they really wanted to work on projects like this, because learning data science in university is one thing, but then actually being able to apply it to real projects and creating real value for a cause that you believe in is super interesting for both parties. And so upon hearing the interest from my co-students, I thought, let's just make a sort of organization out of this. And that's when Everest Analytics got created, let's say, last summer. So what is it exactly? Actually, we just bring together 3 different parties. First of all, you have the clients, which are companies who have a good cause, a cause we can get behind, usually ecologically or socially, and have a lot of data with which interesting projects can be done, but they usually don't have the budget to invest in data science consultants, let's say. We connect those projects to master students, business engineering, data analytics, and computer science students from civil engineering who want to get this hands-on working experience and have the theoretic knowledge on machine learning and stuff from their courses. To make sure these projects go coordinated and structured and meet the deadlines, every group of 6 students is guided by one machine learning professional from one of our partner companies, LM61, ML6, and Crunch, who make sure to guide and help the students and the partners in making sure it's a bit professional. So all in all, it's just one big win-win, a triple win-win-win for everybody involved. There are no real financial flows between any of these 3 parties, and everybody just gets a benefit. So how did we get here? So it sounds really good, all like the project I talked about with Hydrobox. It sounds really cool, but the problem in data science often is everything sounds cool and words are cheap, but actually realizing valuable results with data is often a real challenge. And we knew that up front, but the hurdles we came across were different. We expected the problem to be that we didn't have the experience, the machine learning experience, or that the problems were too complex, the students didn't have the time, etc. But the actual problems were communication. Just that's the biggest one by far, communication. Because a result of that is receiving the data, understanding the data, defining a project scope, and expectations management with the client. We thought we were all on the same page, but then as the project continues, you see problems arising. One of those was very obvious. The students had a conversation with the client in the beginning of the semester, they started working on it with a certain approach. And then when I heard about it, I said, like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, like logically. Are you sure that's what they wanted? And he said, yeah, definitely, that's what they wanted. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but he wanted to do it that way. And then they presented those results at the end of the semester. And then the client said, oh, I didn't mean it like that. I meant it the other way. And so they worked a whole semester on a project just because they misinterpreted something from the client. Same thing with mails. These clients have other work to do. So the students send a mail, the client doesn't respond. And I'm saying, why hasn't the project started yet? And they say, we're waiting for data. I said, did you send a mail? Yes, 2 weeks ago. He hasn't answered yet. I'm like, maybe send a second mail. He's like, oh, that's kind of rude, isn't it? I'm like, no, just send a second mail. They really don't bother. So yeah, learning stuff like this is something you don't get in university. And that's often a really big hurdle in real projects. Communicating with the client. It's also what Achie said, really getting to what they want, not what they say. So that's why we introduced new rules. The client for future projects has to deliver the data up front, have to deliver a data description, and has to deliver a scope, so to remove all these barriers and make it easier. Using these improvements, we went on to new projects this semester. One is with DeltaQ, startup for heating up homes more efficiently and ecologically. The other one is with Kom op tegen kanker, and the other one is with NG on wind turbines. All three of them very interesting projects with better data and better communication. So that was a lesson that I didn't know as a student that was that important, communication and structure for the students. So then the final slide already was next for Everest. We have some events coming up, one on ethics in AI and one on how to start an AI startup with insights from an actual VC fund. And then of course, as I said, we're a non-profit. We just do it because of the mutual win-win for everybody. So if anybody here has any projects that sound interesting or meet the requirements or wants to be a speaker even, don't hesitate to reach out. And our concept is actually pretty scalable. We have a sort of playbook. So if you think, I believe it's useful for students to really get their hands dirty on a data science project and get to learn how it really is. Definitely reach out, and you never know, it's possible to set up a similar thing in your region or university or wherever, because we've noticed students really like to get this other type of experience, which is a bit more frustrating sometimes, but is probably more realistic than what you get at university. So that's it. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Casimir. Indeed. Are there questions from the panelists or the attendees?
I have a question personally.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, is it not frightening to work with students? Because like they don't have the same experience, they don't have the same level. So is it not like, are the clients okay with that, or is this a concept that they are okay with, or even more, is this like interesting, innovative for them? I don't know, what's their feelings about that?
Okay, I was muted. Yeah, it's a very good point. In the beginning, we thought it would be more of a problem, but in the end, it's just free data science projects for them. So they're like, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, nothing to lose. So they're pretty chill about it. And actually, because we're guided by the professional machine learning companies, that's often something that convinces them that we're able to deliver something useful in the end.
Thank you.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Then we have our usual friend, Gianmarco. You had a question?
Yes. So in terms of scalability, do you think it's possible to work with more and more students, with more and more company, or the more people are involved, the more complex it is to manage all the communication between people? So is there like a limit, in your opinion, on how you can grow this thing?
Good question. Actually, the concept is pretty similar to 180 Degrees Consulting, but they're focused on consulting rather than data science, but it's a very interesting non-profit as well. And it started in Australia and they scaled to over almost all universities over the whole world. So very cool, check it out. And our concept with data science is actually pretty similar to theirs. So as long as you structure it in a way like we did with a playbook, and everybody knows their responsibilities. There's a project leader, then a project responsible who does the communication with the client. And that the problem is that changes very quickly because students graduate and new students come. But so your recruiting cycle is the hardest part to scale. But all in all, if there's interest, and there's definitely interest for what we're doing right now, I think it's possible to scale it pretty large, but you need people who want to put their time into it, of course.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Can you repeat the name of the other company that's similar?
Yes, 180 Degrees Consulting. So 180 and then Degrees Consulting.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll give the word to Eleni. You had quite some questions. Wait,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hope it's not too loud. Very interesting. I'm very interested also in all this kind of startups. So thank you very much for the presentation. I want to know if you're also working with students other than the University of Ghent, and if you're also working in cooperation with other NGOs, such as, for example, the Red Cross, or you're focused more on the AI-related ones. And was one more part that and the other plan is like, oh yeah, if you're also collaborating with professors in order to do this master thesis.
I'll answer all three of them. First of all, currently it's only UGent students. It's our first year, but as I said, it could be perfectly expanded in terms of everything that's online. We could have just worked across EU Antwerpen and Leuven and Brussels. But when things hopefully someday go back to normal, it would be nicer to work in person together. So then you'd have to have different branches and different universities. But that's definitely possible. We also talked to the people from BCode, also a very nice organization in Belgium. We discussed the possibility of working together because they're also trying to get deliver hands-on experience to older people then, but the goal is the same. Then collaborating with professors. I mean, we could. Currently, we're not. I mean, I'm collaborating with Johan right now, I guess, and he's a professor, so that counts. But we're not actively collaborating with professors. They have promoted us in their courses because they're a fan of the idea, which is cool to hear. And they could give lectures and they could promote us, but I think it's not bad to keep it separated from the university, although we are definitely mostly UGent. Then the NGOs, yeah, it would be awesome to work with the Red Cross. The only thing that we need is data, enough data, qualitative data, and a clear project scope. And that's often not as easy as it sounds to receive. But if that's there, we definitely would like to work with organizations like that.
Okay, thank you. We'll go for the last question. So if people have questions afterwards, you can still meet speakers on GatherTown. But I'll give the floor to Anton. Sorry, Jacopo. So Anton, you had a question?
Since of course you said a lot about communication, and I think the question is quite obvious. You said that you're working like for half a year, and then the communication was bad, and then in the end you delivered something that the client didn't want. But there are quite famous agile framework as Scrum that normally helps communicating and do the quite often like very fast delivery. Why didn't you use something? I know it's maybe more for development, but why didn't you use Scrum for your in your work?
Yeah, it's a good point. More communication would definitely have been better. Maybe it's important to note we don't work full time on these projects. They're still students, they have to work. So usually it ends up being 1 day a week or a bit more that they work on the project. So then meeting every week just isn't as useful. So if it's only a project of, let's say 10 weeks or something, there's not that much chance of development and interaction to do it too frequently because you don't want to bother the client too much. But it's a good thing we should look into because it could have been done better, and that's what we're working on this semester, improving it.
Okay, so thank you for the talk. And I suggest we now all meet up at GatherTown. Don't forget to fill in the survey. It's important to give feedback to us and to the speakers. Jelena?
So yeah, one last thing, we need to announce the winners of the beers. So the winners this time, Gianmarco, Achille, Eleni, Anton, and Casimir. So